hello everyone. Great to see you all this evening, and a very warm welcome to our second Green Jobs webinar titled Graduating into the Green Workforce. I am Sue Chen from Green SG Collab, and I will be taking you through the beginning of this webinar. So please note that the webinar is being recorded, and we will be producing bite-sized snippets of the webinar for social media pages. If you haven't already done so, please respond to our pre-webinar poll as well. So to provide a short introduction to our team, Green SG Collab is a ground-up initiative focusing on sustainability, and we aim to co-learn with the community. One way we do this is through our webinars, such as the one you are attending tonight. We began hosting our webinars in May last year, and since then, we've organized multiple webinars for the public and covered a wide range of topics from the circular economy to urban farming. Today's webinar is on green jobs. We will begin with introductions by our moderator, and then have individual sharings by our distinguished speakers. After that, we will have a Q&A discussion with our speakers where we invite you to openly ask your questions. To ask your questions, you may raise your hand or type your question in the chat function. Should you need any technical support along the way, you can message Lukman, Sadia, and Rayhon from our team through the chat function. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our moderator, our very own Mr. Aslam Sadar. Aslam has over 20 years of experience working with some of the largest multinational organizations. As a business leader, he has implemented global initiatives and led consultancy and facilitation projects in the supply chain and technology sectors. In his free time, Aslam is a very active community leader and volunteer. He leads Green SG Collab and has been a key part of our organization since its founding. Aslam, please.
Thank you so much, Suchen, and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. I hope everyone is comfortable and ready to listen to what our speakers have to share with us this evening. So 2 weeks back, we had our first of 2 webinar series. This is the second one. And in the last webinar, we learned that there is a broad and widespread trend heading towards green and sustainable jobs. And this is largely because there were a lot of economic drivers that's pushing organizations into this space. Business opportunities through technology, through innovations, through green investing is getting organizations, more focused in rethinking roles and functions. Of course, government policies are also fueling this momentum. So companies are starting to take note. There is greater consciousness, and HR practitioners, functional managers are starting to reshape the way they are thinking about hiring today and into the future. So if you are a fresh graduate, you are a student currently studying, or maybe someone who has worked for a few years, what are some competencies you should be looking out for? What are some of the opportunities you can aspire to get into? And today we have 4 distinguished speakers who will be sharing their thoughts with us about graduating into the green workforce. Please allow me the time to introduce our speakers. First off, we have Mr. Jeremy Sim. He's the creative director of Mistletoe. Absorbed by the world, reshaped by climate and cybernetics, Jeremy is a community organizer at the civilisational prototyping lab Audacity. He's concurrently the creative director of the venture builder Mistletoe, which has over 200 investments in space, agritech, autonomous vehicles, and others. He started as an auditor in Chicago and then served as lead administrator for the EU ERDF Industrial Innovation Network in Nordic Europe and the British Isles. He held various consulting roles in Berlin, Beijing, Abu Dhabi, and Hanoi, including repeated collaborations with G20 co-founder and former G7 chairman Hans Eichel. He received a Creative Talent Award from the Singapore government and produced 7 films, most recently the French-Indonesian art film Abracadabra, nominated in 2020 for 9 Indonesian Oscars. We welcome back Ms. Kok Ilan, Chief People and Organization at the Sunseap Group. Ilan champions Sunseap Group's talent strategy, talent management, learning, and organization development initiatives across the region. Prior to joining Sunsip, she was the group head, people and organization of an Asian family conglomerate, where she subsequently started their family office in Singapore as chief of staff. Ilan has over 3 decades of experience in both corporate HR and HR consulting, as well as people and organization effectiveness initiatives and transformation. She holds an adjunct teaching position at Nanyang Technological University. Chang Xiao Hun is the director for HR at the National Parks Board. Xiao Hun has been with NParks for more than 15 years and oversees a team of HR colleagues handling HR functions such as recruitment and selection, HR information system, employee relations, and talent management. Prior to joining National Parks Board, she was in the healthcare sector for about 10 years, doing compensation, recruitment, HR business partner role, and HR statistics reporting. Last but not least, there is Dr. Therese Chu, Coordinating Director, Living Collections and Facilities Management at the Singapore Botanic Gardens. Therese has been with NParks since 2006, working in a variety of roles from park management, development, and biodiversity research policy. She currently oversees the curation of the Singapore Botanic Gardens living collections, as well as the related grounds operation. Ladies and gentlemen, please give our speakers a very big and warm virtual welcome. And we will kick off the presentation with Mr. Jeremy Sim. So
Hi.
Jeremy, the mic is yours.
Hi, hello. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me do a share screen. I think you guys can see this, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah.
we can.
I'm going to do a very short 5-minute context setting, right? So these views represent my own. They may not be the views of my organization or this panel here. The first slide you see are some of the advertisements that the PUB was putting out earlier this year. I think when they first came out, some of my friends they felt like, wow, this is quite alarming. And I actually felt this was the first time the government agency actually reflected the reality, right? Climate change is real, it's happening, and it's extremely serious. So for this session, I think I have good news and bad news to share. Let's start with bad news because we are Singaporeans, we always eat dessert later. So let's start with the bad news. I think our Titanic moment has arrived. Actually, I think our Titanic moment has arrived a few years ago, right? As a planet, we've hit an iceberg and the ship has begun to sink. This is a map of the world over the last 50 years in terms of how much it has been warming up. This is an up-to-date snapshot of the track that we are in now. We are on track for a 2.9 degree change if we fulfill our pledge actions. Currently, we are not fulfilling those actions, so we're actually worse than that. It's like 3.2 degrees Celsius, right? And what does 3.2 degrees Celsius mean? It means within this lifetime of people like Aslan and myself, we will see record level climate refugees, right? I think this number that's being quoted here, 143 million, is vastly understating the fact, and it's due for a significant revision soon. This is a more up-to-date prediction from last year. Within the lifetime of the Gen Zs and the millennials on this call, we will see almost 20% of the world become uninhabitable. Right now, it's less than 1%. It's unlivable, but it's going to become 20%, 1/5 of the landmass that we have. And this was an article published in the Harvard magazine. I think it was the lead article from the last issue from last year. At the 2 degrees Celsius climate change, which is the amount that we've committed to already, right? We are seeing a very long-term sea level rise of 39 feet, which is a 4-story building, which is a lot higher than any poster that PUB ever put out about a sea level rise. Yeah, of course, this is going to take place over a longer period of time, right? So it's not going to happen next decade or even the next 50 years, but yeah, over a much longer period of time. So now, after that grim start, let's look at some good news. I'm actually an optimist. It's hard to believe from the beginning, but I'm actually a very strong optimist, right? So I think there's 3 pieces of good news we should think about. One, if the planet Earth is the Titanic, Singaporeans are in the first class cabin of the Titanic. Okay, we will be the last to go down, and the bar will be serving drinks the whole way, and the band will be playing. Right, we are amongst the most privileged people in the world. Right. The second piece of good news, other than the fact that we'll be the last to go down, is that unlike the sinking of the real Titanic, right, this planetary emergency is actually partially reversible. Right, it is not beyond hope. Right, and then the third thing is, I think this defining crisis of our lifetime is also the defining opportunity for investment and collaboration. These are some of the statements that have come out in recent years, and I'll actually just like to focus in on the second one, which is from our dear Prime Minister, Mr. Lee. This was from the National Day speech from 2019, right? So he's guessing that we will probably need to spend 100 billion or more, right, to put up climate change defenses, right? And it should be as serious as the SAF. And then he says something that really made me like nod. Yeah, he really gets it, right? There's a difference between the SAF and climate change and sea level rise. With the SAF, if we invest billions and billions in the SAF, we hope to never go to war because we have an incredibly strong SAF. But with climate change and sea level rise, we're investing in it because we know the seas are coming. There is no getting around it. And I don't think this is scaremongering at all. This is the most accurate reflection of climate change I've heard from a politician, and I'm very glad it came from our Prime Minister. And shortly after the following year, the US President-elect Joe Biden declared climate change as the #1 issue for his administration. And the most recent world leader to join the party is actually the arch rival in China. President Xi has decided to use China as an example to show the world how to most dramatically reduce carbon emission intensity and go from carbon peak to carbon neutrality. Right. So this is a very big, bold claim, and I feel like this is a way that they are positioning themselves for world leadership. Right. To be a leader, you have to serve a purpose, and I think this was a great purpose for them. More recently, there's been articles out from Madam Ho and also from NUS looking at how we can look at climate change as an investment opportunity and a business opportunity. Elon Musk has joined the party with a record $100 million prize for any ideas to capture carbon in very large quantities. It's the largest such prize in the history of startups. Right. I think this is probably the final slide I would like to show you guys. This is a sign of how far we've come along, and this is the main reason why I'm so positive. Right. So when I started worrying about climate change, I thought it was going to be an apocalypse. Just 2021 is a very important year. It's the 10th year anniversary of a very interesting movement that started in 2011. Some students in a small number of universities in the US started campaigning. They started protesting. Why is my university investing in fossil fuels and oil companies? And eventually, some of those universities capitulated and exited those investments. Some didn't, but they managed to get some attention, and other institutional investors joined them. And then in 2019, just 2 years ago, the world's largest sovereign wealth fund, which manages over $1 trillion, it's the Norwegian Oil Fund, whose base capital is oil, announces that they're also divesting from fossil fuels. And you can see the momentum in the year 2021, right? So there's an investor coalition that pledged 41 trillion there's an investor coalition managing 41 trillion of assets, and they propose to end global government support for fossil fuels. This 41 trillion asset under management coalition basically doubled in size over the last 6 months. So that coalition has grown to now over 90 trillion. And we are dealing with very large numbers here, but just to give you a sense of what $90 trillion is, it's a 4 or 5 Chinas. It's how much GDP 4 or 5 China's produces in a year. So this movement has become unstoppable, and I'm really excited to see where it will go from here. I think that will be it for me.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you so much for context setting and perhaps sharing with us the huge opportunities available. It's very interesting, right? $41 trillion worth of investment by a group of investors pledging to move away from fossil fuel. And I think this sets the stage for us to now hear Ilan, who's from Sunsip, really in the thick of the action in the renewable energy space, right? So Ilan, you look set to benefit from this great movement. So the mic is yours for you to share your thoughts.
Sorry, realize I forgot to unmute. I'm just going to share screen, yeah? Can you see the slides, everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Oops. All right. I don't need any more introduction. I'm just going to really jump right into the context of today's conversation. So, Sunsip, I have got my colleague to help me put this one page that says all that we do. In a nutshell, we are really in all things clean energy and renewable energy. So some example would be if you see, your electricity power out from Sunsip as well. That's our energy retail. I'm not going to talk about every single one, but you see some of the car charging, EV charging, we're in that space as well. And a lot more rooftop solar panel. And you have also heard recently, we are going to build in Batam the world's largest floating solar farm. So that's a very quick introduction of who we are. We started 10 years ago by two very entrepreneurial and visionary Singaporean, graduated from NTU 10 years ago. That's Frank Kwan and Lawrence Wu, both of whom are my bosses. And they started with just a vision. And 10 years later, here we are as we celebrate our 10th anniversary. Oftentimes when I started talking to people and courting talent, I don't paint a bed of roses. I told them that, you know what, we are a child growing very quickly to become an adult. And there's a lot of growing pain in that process, but it is a very, very exciting journey. The growth is not just in Singapore, but certainly across the region, in Asia Pacific and the Middle East as well. So at the introduction just now, I was telling Aslam, they say, hey, you're in this exciting industry. I say, yeah, it's very exciting. That keeps me awake. And as I'm talking, I'm also worrying about the new office setup in Indonesia and the new office space in Malaysia. So that's the kind of growth and that's the kind of excitement we are in. So I want to share with you something that we did pretty bold. I don't know whether you've heard about Sunsip Solar Technologies. So I joined Sunsip end of February this year, and being very, very task focused and performance focused, I sat down my bosses, I sat them down and I said, now tell me what are my top 3 KPIs, right? You hire me to transform the organization. Tell me the top 3 KPIs. And okay, among other things, growing big and some organizational lip, so to speak. One of the KPI was, you know what? We have to hire 300 heroes. I go like, what? 300 heroes? I've not been in the solar industry. I mean, my first, so to speak. And then, so that was a tagline. We use heroes, but just an acronym to say, you know, we're out there trying to start something never started before. And that's basically the solar technologies that they were referring to. So I remember on the 4th of May, I was crafting out the job description of solar technologies. And that's because by the noon, I was told that Prime Minister Lee is going to talk about Sunseap's growth in this sustainability space, and we're going to blast this whole thing out, right? So I always remember on the 4th of May, 12 o'clock p.m., I was told, drafted the job description, all ready to put in all the national platform. And the moment Prime Minister talked about it, I still remember at the National May Day speech on the 31st minute, all right, he spoke about Sunseap's sustainability in mandate and growth, and calling Singaporean to join us. My national platform, the national platform already had my job description of solar technologies. That was when we started May. And by August, we have actually filled the mandate of 300 solar technologies. But that said, right, we decided to slow down even by August because we were hitting 200 and we realized that, you know, the system need a little bit of digestion, so to speak. But in a nutshell, why did we do this? Now, we were in a time of what I would call challenges hit by pandemic, but out of these challenges come possibility. So we remember, that was before I joined the company, I was told that we have a deadline to deliver on the floating project in Sentosa, I think so. So what happened is, with the pandemic, there were just no foreign workers, right? No foreign workers whatsoever. So this ingenious ideas that we mobilize Sunseap office staff, every one of them went down, and they managed to finish the project. And there lies this idea like, hey, you know, this is possible. And the whole Singaporean core transformation started with this idea of possibility amidst the pandemic. It forced us into a situation to think very big about what we can do given the constraint. Now we've got mega project with HDB, with schools and industrial building to put up those panels, but then yet we have a whole lot of misplaced workforce, whether they are from the oil and gas, construction, you name it. And then if you look at this whole Singapore story, it became a very compelling story for us. We are a Singaporean, wholly Singapore company, started by Singaporean. We have national sustainability project. Now, with that, we have also a lot of Singaporeans that are out there, displaced, retrenched, jobless. So we think about ways even to entice the gig economy. So in this whole process, the exciting thing is to promise this misplaced workforce a career that never existed before in Singapore. Never, all right? So we actually started this whole training. We learned along the way. We're very, very thankful that the various ministry, the government came alongside with us. We worked closely with ITE to design learning program. We also were heading up together with the Institute of Engineering, Institute of Engineer Society, IES, to design chartered technician technologies and chartered engineer career paths. So if you are familiar with IES, they have different, I would say, industrial sectors. So we belong to the clean energy sector. So under the clean energy sector, the chairmanship was actually held by us. So we actually lead that committee to design from scratch, working with IHL, Higher Learning, Institute of Higher Learning, yeah, IHL, to design program just to ensure that when you are in that trade, okay, you are the best guy to know the trade and to certify the quality of the trade. Now, today in Singapore, we don't have that. If we want to certify any work done by, in the space of solar technologies, they go back to the LEW, which is the licensed engineers, right? And what better way then can it be that we train the right people to do the right, within the right trade, to certify their own work? And I can go on, right? So some of the people we have really converted, the cooks that were retrenched by the hotels, the restaurant closed down, are now on our rooftop. Fresh graduates with, they were out there for a while, no jobs. They are now with us. We have also converted people who are out there, they are Grab delivery, food delivery, they have joined us as well. So it's this whole, I would say the whole transformation and the whole redesign of the landscape, I would say, in this space. Challenging, of course it is, but we're learning as we learn along with these folks who trust us in this journey. And today we are gaining the momentum. The first batch have been with us 3 months. Every month we onboard, on the average, about 40 of them, all the way to the end of the year. All right, so some of you may be asking, hey, what's the profile like? Quick feel, okay. 47% of them come from ITE, 43% come from the polytechnics, and another 10%, we've got some graduate engineering graduate, very few of them, and some of the other background. But that forms, like I said, it's a journey that because of the way we redesign this entire workforce, we believe that it is a sustainable journey as we continue to champion and support the mandate. I give you a feel of what that means. So the Singapore government has made a commitment to have clean energy as a national sustainability mandate of by year 2025 to hit 1.5 gigawatt. That's a huge lot of clean energy. If I were to use a very simple math, right, that translates to about 800 employees in the green and sustainability space every year just to meet that target, okay? So what do we look out for? Now, this slide, I can go on and on and on, all right? As I mentioned earlier, I also teach in the as an adjunct with the university, and a lot of time I actually talk about these things with the student, especially when you are a fresh graduate. Don't think about just making money, okay? Think about what can you offer and what can you learn. And even with my son, I think he's in the midst here. Sometimes, you know, we have family chat and they talk about, oh, who's making how much money and all that kind of stuff. So my statement to him is very simple. As a fresh graduate, right, whatever salary you're getting is pure bonus. Why? Because you're learning. And you know what? And when you're learning, the more you have that stewardship, you own it, the more you learn. So some of these terms are not new, right? I mean, how hungry am I to learn? Now, grit really is really about tenacity. All right. So when I mean, some of you, if you see the advertisement I run, I will always say never say die, because if you say die, it's very hard to even survive, right? So never say die attitude is really about adaptability. We are in a constant change, right? I can hire someone tomorrow, they wear 5 hats because the business calls for it. The job calls for it. You want to journey with the business. I'm in HR, right? I'm in people and transformation. If I want to lead transformation, I cannot be behind. When the business change, I must at least be together with them. Adaptability and strategic thinking really is not for the leaders, it's for everyone at every level. Do I think ahead what's going to happen? Do I plan ahead what's going to happen so that I can be ahead of the game? And that applies even with the receptionist, right? If I'm not going to be around, who's going to receive the parcel? I plan ahead. So not going to spend a lot of time here because the next slide is more exciting, which is we're hiring a lot of people. Now, a lot of these roles are only in Singapore, okay? So I've not put anything across the region in here. Across the region, I've got more than 10 as well. You'll be asking, you have high turnover? No, a lot of these are actually new roles. So for example, management training within the people and organization, I'm after always after very hungry and those 5 words there, a fresh graduate, train them, expose them, part of talent management, succession planning. The specialist role, again, under my department, learning and development, you see the LinkedIn sign, then these are all in LinkedIn, right? That's because I just started the journey of developing and starting Sunseed Academy. Now, Sunseed Academy have an immediate task. As I'm designing it, we already have an immediate commitment to build a Sunseed Academy in Batam to train 3,000 workers. All right, so there's really an explosion in terms of what we are poised to do out there. The rest of the role are either in LinkedIn or JobStreet, but even if everything fails, because you go in there, all the job description is there, and then you can send, otherwise just send in your CV, just write into talent@sunseed.com. So I know I'm only given 10 minutes, but I've spoken a lot more than that. So I got to say, I stop here.
Wow, thank you so much, Ilan. I never expected Sunseed is expanding so rapidly, right? And I think the last webinar you did not even mention the jobs you're hiring, and this time you're posting it. So I thought it was very interesting to hear and see that. Very enlightening. All right, I'm going to just quickly pass on to Xiao Hun and Therese. I believe both of you will be sharing the mic together. So mic is yours.
Hi everyone, Xiao Hun here from MPAX. Therese and I will be doing a joint presentation. So I'll start off our presentation about MPAX to share with you what MPAX does. Okay, so a very broad introduction. Okay, we have this city in nature. I'm sure some of you have heard about this. So what is this city in nature vision that guides MPAX in what we do, and also to chart our future direction? So what actually we are doing with this city in nature vision is we are restoring nature into our urban fabric, okay, to help to mitigate impacts of urbanization as well as climate change. So MPAX currently oversee about 350 parks as well as national gardens, 4 nature reserves, as well as an extensive network of park connector. Okay, so we also have recently announced our 1 million trees movement sometime last year. So with this 1 million trees movement, what we hope to do is to be able to partner the community to plant 1 million trees across the island over the next decade of within 10 years. Okay, so MPAX actually has an important role to play in protecting Singapore's rich biodiversity so as to conserve our natural legacy for future generations. And in Singapore's progress towards a city in nature, we will not be able to do it, with just the efforts of NParks. We actually have received the help of a large part from the community. So it involved both the volunteers as well as the residents. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with our city community in bloom volunteer network to help to promote gardening in our community. Yeah, and the other key aspect that we're doing is also to train talents for not just NParks, but the industry as a whole. And we partner the IHL closely, to weave in changes in the curriculum and what we expect to see in the landscape sector, tapping on technology and digitalization so that we can move the entire industry together and to achieve the city in nature for Singapore. Yeah. Can I hand over to Therese? Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Xiaohun. By the way, if you're wondering why the slides don't seem to match exactly what Xiaohun is saying, it's just because these are random screenshots that I pulled out. Maybe I'll just go back to explain what they were. As you may or may not know, right, there's a Singapore Green Plan, right, of 2030 Green Plan. So city and nature is actually just one of the pillars, actually, so which means it's a very big, important part. So that's kind of where a lot of our NParks work sort of sits. Okay, anyway, Xiaohun had the harder job of talking about NParks and what we did. Actually, what I'm going to talk a little bit about is more of my own experience here in terms of sustainability and my own experiences in work in NParks and how this kind of relates. And I'm going to start this by saying that, until I was asked to be part of this webinar, I've never considered myself as having a green job, which might seem strange to most people if you think that conservation, biodiversity, and all the NParks work is green. And when I polled my staff, I asked a whole bunch of youngsters, what should I say? What do you guys want to talk about? The answers I got from my staff as well kind of indicated that they didn't consider themselves their jobs necessarily green jobs either. Which I find curious. And when I think about it a little bit more, I think maybe it's because when we think of green jobs, sometimes, especially, some people anyway, you get hijacked by thoughts of like technology and like all the newfangled stuff, when actually a lot of the work that we do in normal jobs as well has components of trying to be sustainable and green. And I think I don't know, in some ways, I'm actually quite happy to hear from my team and all that we don't really consider ourselves as green jobs, because it's so ingrained in what we do that it becomes naturally anyway. So sustainability is something that we think every job you should have thinking about in the first place. Okay, anyway, that's a random thought. These are random pictures of NParks. Okay, by the way, the reason why I'm putting these up is if you want to know more about NParks, I'm not going to tell you much more, but you can go to our YouTube channel and there's plenty of videos about kind of the stuff that we do, including some of the community things. Okay, so where I wanted to start with is that since I don't think of myself, since I've never really thought about green jobs on a whole, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the work I've done and where I've come from. And then it gives you a little bit of insight maybe into some of you who might be interested in similar things in conservation and biology and kind of the work that you could do in the future. And let me just say, I started off with this, and this might be aging me. I don't know if any of you recognize these things. Do you remember from primary school? Maybe not, some of you anyway. In primary school, you could do these young scientists. I am a young botanist. I am a young environmentalist, kind of like little things, and you collect stars and you get a badge. Yeah, so I realized, looking back now, age 9 and 10-year-old me, I only did two. I'm a young botanist and I'm a young environmentalist. And actually, those are the two things that I ended up doing in university and in work, which is kind of interesting. So this kind of nature, plants, that kind of stuff has always interested me, which is why I did an undergraduate degree in science, majoring in botany before joining NParks. And I've been there for about 15 years already. But what I wanted to say is, again, when I joined NParks, I think as Asan mentioned, right, I was doing park management, a whole bunch of other random things that when you first start work, I kind of echo what Ilan said just now, that any of your first jobs never really meet the expectation of what you think you were going to do, simply because you don't really have an idea of what real life is like. So like I can pretty much classify my first, 6-7 years of work as a slap in the face of what reality is. So here, youngsters coming in thinking that I want to do all these big, science and and all that, when you actually the first years are very important to actually get a good grip on how work actually goes. I'll give you a specific example. Okay, so like one of my first jobs was in East Coast Park. I was a manager at East Coast Park, and environmental sustainability, something big on my mind, right? I'm like, okay, yes, why don't we do something more recycling? We need more recycling bins. Why aren't there any of these recycling bins around? So, you know, and then when I finally talked to colleagues, I found out that, oh, actually they had tried it before, but what they had found happened was that we put out all these recycling bins, right, to collect different trash, and then all these little aunties and uncles will walk by and raid all the recycling bins of all the aluminum cans. They collected it themselves, then they go and sell to Karang man themselves, therefore making it difficult for our contractors later on. They couldn't make, because they were getting the money from the aluminum cans, so it was no longer sustainable for them to do business. So it's just a little example of how I think back on that sometimes, because where it's a good example of how, you know, simple things you think are simple to do are not always it's not always so easy in real life. Because in this case, we didn't really think about the social fabric that we were in terms of the park management, in terms of how people react with all the stuff that we have. And so my takeaway really is that, you know, it's good the first few years, no matter what job you're in, it's good to just remember to be bold, try things out, but then really learn you know, how the world works, and so that later on you'll be more effective in the things that you want to do. I think I wanted to make a second point, because I realized, and this comes from a lot of interactions with a lot of people who are in the conservation realm. So in my work in NParks, I deal a lot of people who are interested in biology conservation, and it's good to remember that even within Singapore, people who are generally interested in conservation, biodiversity, we're a privileged lot. So, you know, usually these are, you know, they're undergraduates who come from middle-class families and all this. So it's something to remember that, yes, these are important things that we need to think about, but there are also a suite of other issues too, which other people are facing, which, you know, sometimes environmental sustainability may not be the first thing on their mind. So it's just something that I'm not sure where I'm going with. I just wanted to make that point that, you know, this is something like real life is quite complicated. There's all these other things you need to manage as well. So yeah. Okay, anyway, I think the other thing I wanted, okay, yeah, so back to what I'm trying to tell you, my story. So you can ask questions later, and then I can answer better. So I have been in NParks, and now I'm in the Botanic Gardens for a while. Sometime after the getting slapped around by real life, I actually also furthered my studies. So I did a doctorate in plant evolutionary biology, which gave me a different type of perspective in terms of timelines, evolution, speciation, extinction, and all those kind of things. So one thing I really appreciate within working in NParks is that we're also very, okay, this didn't join very well, but like also very science-based. So a lot of the things that we do have a grounding in what, so in ecology and botany and all, like all these like sort of yeah, grounding in science basically. So it's important to have this, I think. Where was I going with that? I'm not sure. It also, maybe just to tie in a little bit of what Jeremy says, it also kind of makes me, like when I see people like Jeremy say, Jeremy, like you said, right, we're on the planet Earth is on the Titanic. You know, the scientist part of me is like, not really. Maybe human civilization as we know it now, and perhaps the current fragile balance of biodiversity, maybe yes. But in terms of like planet Earth and biodiversity on a whole and nature, no, not really. You know, in millions of years, the climate has changed much more than this. So much stuff has happened. So I'm not saying this is not important. It is important, especially for us as humans, because as human civilization as we know it, yes, is on a collision course of climate. But it's if you guys are going to study and all that, it's also interesting to you know, different perspectives of a timeline and life and all that. Okay, anyway, I'm babbling. What I wanted, okay, so I think maybe what's most relevant to most of you now is kind of the work that I've been involved with in more recent years, because I feel like I've gone through the study side of things, enriched my mind and gotten interested in lots of different things, played around and nest up in terms of work as a youngster. Now where I am now is I've had a lot more, I'm older, getting involved in quite a lot of different types of aspects of conservation and environmental sustainability as well. And where we are in NParks and what I've also done in the past, if you want to find out more, is a lot more about conservation I spent quite a bit of time at the nexus of conservation policy and research. So a little bit about where we, looking at city and nature, how do we going to achieve city and nature? So, and all the different components, that how they fit together. So how do we rely on some of the studies that, what they say in terms of, bunch ecology, systems services, all that ecosystem services and stuff like that, and how to actually make it a reality when you have to deal with other agencies, deal with other partners and all that. So I did quite a bit of that. And right now, now finally the slide. Right now where I am is I'm actually based in the Botanic Gardens. I look after, as Aslan said, I look after operations. So we run the garden, looking after living collections, which is basically all the collections of plants and habitats that we have in the garden, as well as running all the day-to-day stuff. So, if I snapshot it out, sound like that, it doesn't really sound like my job is a green job in environmental sustainability. But yet, as I mentioned earlier, everything we do sort of is infused. And this is a point I want to make, where a lot of normal jobs, there's if I think about this as a normal job, running a place, it has many different aspects. Some of it is like, I need to look after lights, lighting, electricity, aircon, all that kind of stuff. There's so much we can do operationally with sustainability in mind to actually make improvements. And a lot of the stuff that we do in the gardens now has always been, we've always had sustainability in mind, from the way we look after the landscapes, like trying to incorporate leaf litter and recycling, natural recycling into the ground, from irrigation, trying to rely on our lakes. So here's a picture, you can see some of the lakes, Swan Lake, Symphony Lake, as much as possible for irrigation, so that we can reduce need for relying on PUB water, all that kind of thing. And then now also moving towards much more of really going down to the nuts and bolts of how much electricity am I using for a cool house? How much electricity are we using for these buildings? What can we do to try and monitor and reduce our impact? So so sustainability is something that we are always thinking about. And I think this as young people in the workforce or going to join the workforce, you don't always have to think about the sexy green jobs out there. There's plenty of work that needs to be done at every job. It's a mindset change, really, and it's good to incorporate some of these concepts about sustainability is where we go. Okay, I think I think that I'll stop. We'll answer questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Therese. As I was thinking and hearing your career trajectory, I think it fit a lot of the batches you showed. You've went and done a lot of functions in NParks, right, through your career and time with them. So I'm glad to see that the audience have posed questions, and I welcome the speakers to interact with the audience. We are now getting into the Q&A segment of our webinar, and let's spotlight our speakers. And let me just start by bringing Jeremy into the conversation, and maybe ask Jeremy. Jeremy, your profile is you are also in a space that invests, through Mistletoe in technologies. What are some of the exciting developments or investments you see investors putting into specifically, and how can our I guess students, graduated students, or young working adults here, or even adults here who have worked for many years, participate in that space? So Jeremy, your thoughts? And if you could share some specific examples, I think that would be really helpful.
Thank you so much. So I work, Mistletoe is kind of like a family office. So it's the founder is Taizo. He's a serial entrepreneur. Some people know him as the youngest brother of the founder of SoftBank, but he himself is an amazing guy. Been around for about 7 years, and made about 200 investments. So I think initially our investments were like quite wild. So 2014, we were investing in self-driving cars, outer space cleanup, a startup that cleans up trash in outer space. What else? Drone delivery for airdropping critical medical supplies in Africa. And in 2014, a lot of people said, wow, that's really noble. It makes no sense, but that's really noble, right? Those companies are either unicorns or halfway to becoming unicorns, right? So The self-driving car was acquired by Zoox last year. The drone company Zipline, Temasek, just invested last year, I think 2 or 3 rounds after us. In all these cases, we wrote the first check. The idea is that if you have a founder who's super passionate, has this bold vision, and most people think they're a little bit crazy or foolhardy, like that's the kind of people that we want to back. I think coincidentally, this Friday, I'm running like a bootcamp for Singapore startup founders. And a lot of them are in the green space and the resilience building space, right? So growing food in like all different parts of Singapore, how to harvest water from kind of like atmospheric generators, a lot of different approaches. I think for the young people here, what I would suggest is for these companies like Elon's company Sunsip, which is a fantastic company, and NParks, which is possibly my favorite government agency in the whole wide world, not just Singapore. I feel like any chance that you can have to take a position with them, whether as a volunteer or as an intern or you know as a full-time position, it's a great opportunity to learn, right? Because I think to do a startup like what I specialize in, you need to look at it as more than a job. So I would suggest get your feet wet in this space, go work for a reputable organization like NParks or Sunsip, find your passion, learn what you like, and then, you know, if you find something that really, you know, sticks to you, maybe we can have this conversation and look at how we can build a startup together. Yeah.
Wow. So that's that. So your pitch is really about, you know, try something, gain knowledge quickly, and then start thinking about opportunities, right, to start up. If you have the courage, of course. I mean, startup is really not for everyone.
Yeah. More than that, it has to be an itch that you can't stop scratching. Because there's so many chances to give up, you know, only if you're like addicted to doing it, you should do it as a startup. Yeah.
Definitely. I thought maybe I could bring the HR leaders here. You know, we have 2 this time around. Very fortunate. We have Xiao Hun and we have Ilan. So we received a number of questions, you know, prior to this webinar, you know, pre-webinar questions they post, right? And the questions is always, you know, the trend in the questions is, you know, I don't have experience. My degree is not in this area. You know, and I'm interested in it. I want to get in, but I don't know how. So from a HR perspective, because obviously the HR is always the first gate, right? Before it goes further up. What do you like to see in a resume that will make them pass through that first gate? And, you know, for someone who may not even have studied biology, geography, or any of those green or sustainability related topics. So anyone wants to start first? Maybe Xiao Hun, what do you think?
Okay. I would like to take that question because we have seen quite a lot of such cases in NParks. I think passion is very important. And also, because we passion, I'm sure you would have done something like in your own personal space, be it at home. So I'm sure you would have some sort of green, like for NParks, we look for people with green fingers, people who really passionate or even have done some outreach or volunteer activities in the community relating to nature, greenery. So these are some examples that we will consider, even if without the relevant academic qualifications, for example. Yeah.
Ilan, yourself?
I think if we open our mind about this space, it's really a very broad space, even in where HR sit, it is also in the sustainability sector because we hire people in this space, right? So one of the things a team, my colleague has interestingly introduced is that we don't call our employee, whether you, I mean, first of all, I think Sunsip has a very down-to-earth culture. We have no hierarchy. So it becomes very apt where we call ourselves the green collars. We don't say you blue collar, white collar, we're all green collars because we're in the space of sustainability. And therefore, so what I'm trying to cover here is it's more than engineering, it's more than the solar, it is in the space of marketing, IT, HR, learning. It is a green sector when you when your company is in that field, because you are part of the entire economy of things, so to speak. And the other thing, what then do we look out for? I had this very interesting, I'm not even saying that is anything new of sort, but every time when we try to go higher, we often encounter scarcity in talent. Very interestingly, why? There are certain things that we want to look at, right? Granted that at a certain level of experience, you need certain relevant experience, that's for sure. For example, if I'm looking for a business development manager in the solar space, whether is it in the utility space or consumer industry, you need the experience, because it's a fairly technical trade by the time you reach a certain level to be able to position a sales proposal, for example. But that said, right, because the industry is pretty niche and pretty new, the scarcity is there for solar related talent. But at entry level, really, what I've shown in the slide, sometimes we even have problem with finding fresh graduates who are hungry enough. I'm sorry, but that we do have a situation. We do have situation like that, where something is not equal. It's not in equation. It's not equal out, right? You said like tons of graduate out there, but yet when you really want to find that talent, it can be a hard find.
But what can a potential talent do to put himself in front of you? I guess that is the one that would probably the minds of many.
Yeah. So one of the things I always tell my students is, where's the safest place for you to make mistake? University, right? Go out there, do things, try things uncharted. Take on leadership role. I was teaching organization behavior. I don't know, some of my students may be in the midst. And you know what? In 13 chapter, they try to teach the student the whole world of organization. It's impossible. Unless and until you taste it, they remain paper knowledge. So where is the best place to make mistake? University, because you can't die. You won't get your demotion. You won't get your pay cut. Right? You can only learn and continue to collect your nuggets and make yourself create that differentiation for yourself. Right? It's not about the grades, It's really not about the grades, because I can tell you the grades you throw out there, not just Singaporean, we have a lot of competition from international students. So forget about grades, right? Go out there, try jobs that you've never done before, wet your feet, internship. Don't talk about money, just learn, right? If you can find this sort of attitude, it is one cut, and maybe a few notches above, right? Yeah.
Very good. So clearly, it's similar to the messages that we had in the last webinar, right? Even volunteering gives you a bit of an advantage. Therese, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add on to this simply because I think our HR side does a great job of shortlisting people and then sending to us, which we then hire. And I just wanted to say two things. One is, yes, both what Jeremy and Yunan said about having internships and volunteering is great because that shows you've done it. Also, very simple. Having a good cover letter actually directed to the job that you're trying to apply for and explaining why you're interested in it. So I think I've hired many people who may not always have had the best experience, but where they actually were interested and could articulate that. You'd be surprised at how few people do this. So it was just a very small, specific tip.
Right, a good cover letter. Okay. So I'm just going to go a bit tangent here. I think I'm looking at some of the posts in the group chat, which I thought were quite interesting. May not necessarily be related to this, but I think overall it talks about sustainability. So Venus asked quite a few questions, I think, how how do you define sustainability? It's a big term in the industry that's been around for 30 years, and still climate issues are getting worse, and why should we sustain it? If it's not working well, why should we sustain it? Why should we keep doing it in the same way? Do we need something more than sustainability? Perhaps not so much related to jobs, but overall from an industry perspective, how would you define sustainability? Are you seeing a trend, a movement, right, in reshaping or redefining sustainability in the sectors you are looking at? Who wants to go with this question first? Jeremy?
That's a very challenging question, Aslam.
Asked by Venus. I'm giving her credit.
I was actually listening to a talk earlier today by Carl Sagan. I don't know how many of you know Carl Sagan, and he was talking about climate change in the 80s. And he said in the 80s that the last 5 years of the 80s were the hottest 5 years on record. And then I went to take a quick look at the weather then. It would be by far the coldest years the planet has had in the 21st century. Like, that's how bad it is. So we have people ringing the alarm since the 80s, like even before that, right? And I think we've generally given that a deaf ear. But I think humanity, we have this tendency to really go to the precipice of disaster, put one foot over that edge, and then like, you know what? I think I'm going to try to stay alive. So I think that's probably what's going to happen here. And I think in the year 2021, we've not just have 1 foot over the precipice. I think we have most of the toes on the other foot over the precipice. And yeah, I'm very optimistic that this is a decade that we pull back, right? But yeah, no guarantees of that either.
Yeah, so, absolutely. I think you brought up a very good point, and it kind of reminds us or reminded me of the first webinar we had. So the first webinar we had was in May, I think the end of May 2020. We were still in circuit breaker. And what's the one interesting fact that we talked about? Firstly, carbon in the atmosphere fell. You actually can see the stars, in tropical Asia, which normally you can't. And in some countries, the air quality just improved tremendously, right? So I think the whole pandemic, coupled by the message of climate change and the climate crisis, has amplified this thinking significantly. Okay, I want to actually show the poll results at this point. We have done a poll, the audience, thank you so much. So we're going to pull out the poll results and just see what have you come back with. So the first one is, what is an ideal green job? Wow, so the majority of you felt that it is one that is immersed and surrounded by greenery and wildlife. Technology came in second, followed by community building and people empowerment. That's for the first question. Entrepreneurship is actually not too far away either. Next one, why are you interested in the green career? It's meaningful and it's rewarding is one of the highest scores, followed by it aligns with my values, and the job potentially could be interesting and it presents new career opportunities. And finally, how long are you willing to actively search? So clearly 4 to 6 months seems to be the right average, right? That's the highest score. So I thought I would just maybe start with our MPAC's colleagues, maybe in HR or Therese. Looking at question 1, the ideal job is a green job. One surrounded by greenery and wildlife. Any surprises here that you see? I think
maybe I start first. Yeah. I don't see any surprise here, because there is quite a straightforward linkage to what a green job is about. Yeah.
Okay, Therese.
Yeah, I mean, as I said in the very beginning, I wouldn't have associated that kind of stuff with green jobs, because in my head it was always about sustainable energy, renewable energy. But actually, no, it makes sense. And it's actually very heartening to see more and more people actually appreciate being in nature and you know, having all this around you, because this is the kind of the work we've been plugging at for a long time. But you know, it's really gained traction in public a lot more in recent years than in past. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Second question really talks about interest in green careers. So clearly there's a lot of interest there. I doubt there's any surprise here, but on the third question, how long will it actively take to search for green jobs? Majority 4 to 6 months, right? Does this seem to be a good average, you think?
Can I just say, I think if people are looking for your ideal green job, you're probably not going to be able to find it so soon anyway. Like, so much stuff is you get your, you try things out, you find out what you like, what you don't, and then you actually incorporate what you want in the job itself, you know, within the autonomy you have of your work. So yeah, it's good that you try and find the jobs that if you have a realistic idea what they are, that's good. But sometimes, you know, the not so ideal things in the beginning turn out to be much better than you might think.
Okay.
Well,
Ilan, can you see the poll?
I can only see poll 1. I just wanted to make sure that I am addressing the question that you
poll 1, question 2 and 3. Yep.
Okay. So I have sorry, I've accidentally clicked it off. I thought that
no worries.
you were referring to poll 2. I don't have
no, that's fine.
But just really to answer that 4 to 6 month thing, there's just too many variable. Sometimes it is, you know, it's almost not really having that crystal ball in front of you to answer a question like that. And a lot of time, I can only say that in times such as now, where the whole global emphasis is really around sustainability, both the private sector coming to, especially the government side, committing the funds to make it happen, not just at country level, but at the global level, then you will see that is the opportunity. So opportunity will give you higher probability, right? So I can only use that more from a logical standpoint, but right down to an individual, it becomes a harder statement to make.
Yeah. So I suppose from a realistic standpoint, 4 to 6 months is a success. So maybe.
Sorry, I think you get a little bit.
I muted for a while. I hang for a while.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was just saying, perhaps, you know, 4 to 6 months as an average may not be a realistic way to think about it, but perhaps, you know, a longer time to search for that ideal position that you're looking for, and along the way just develop the skills that you need. Right. I've got a couple of questions here, and I think some of the speakers have responded, so I might just pass on those. There's one question on climate policies, right? How do you expect job growth and demand in the green space as compared to data science? So it's really about relativity, by Celine Ang. So she's talking about, with the new climate policies, UN SDG, Singapore Green Plan, companies are setting goals into 2030, 40, 50. How do you expect job growth and demand in the green space as compared to data science? So comparing green jobs with a very specific role like data science. Anyone want to talk about that?
I think they're both the demand for it. I can't see a limit to it. Yeah.
You can't see a limit to it means?
Yeah, it's a great place to be. Yeah. The world needs a lot of data scientists. It needs a lot of people in the green sector. I think it's basically like asking, you know, would you prefer to eat chili crab or would you prefer to eat char kway teow? Like, what must I choose? Like, both are incredibly delicious, and you should go with the one that you enjoy working in more, because they're both great. Yeah.
So I think to that question, Celine, and maybe this is something, Therese, you could also share, because you're really at the forefront of NParks managing facilities as well, right? Do you see data science or data analysis an important function or skill in the kind of jobs that you oversee?
Yes, and I think, and this also kind of might Mingyang asked as well earlier on about, or maybe it was later, about greenwashing and how do you know whether your own performance is really sustainable. A lot of it comes down to the data that you collect. Okay, so maybe not, this is not data analysis. Sometimes this is very simple data analysis, which is just making sure you're actually metering things, measuring things that you actually want to be measuring. So, and then so at the very basic level, you know, like how much electricity am I using? How much water am I actually using? Being able to collect this data. And then the data analysis part later comes on when it comes to collecting long-term information and trying to correlate it, you know, with how things are changing. So for instance, one of the things that we're looking at in the gardens, we're not doing a great job of it yet, but one thing that we want to look at is our watering regime, how much I'm actually watering in my different areas, and how do I correlate this later with climate and how, I mean, actual weather data and how that is changing. Because, you know, it's easy to say I want to reduce my watering by X% or something like this, but then at the same time the weather is fluctuating even more, so I have to change my operations anyway. So this kind of, I mean, when you really drill down to questions like this kind of data analysis actually is very important for us to be able to then make proper decisions later on. So I don't know if that answers, but yes, I think these are important things when you actually drill down to it, the nuts and bolts of things.
So there's actually a lot of link in a way, right? Because data science, it's important. And I think, I'm not sure, but maybe you can add to this. I believe NParks is also using a lot of data analytics to help in the decisions they make about planting and some of the science behind, you know, growing trees or climate and temperature measures. Am I right?
Yeah, so yes. So we there's a lot of stuff we want to do when it comes to weather data, tree analytics as well, how trees respond with different types of you know, more storms and all this, to very simple things like making sure we have sensors to know when how much rubbish I have in my bins, what's the most efficient way to be operationalizing my cleaning regimes and all this. So this is something which NParks is really pushing for. So we want to measure everything, basically measure everything, so that we can actually make informed decisions. And then the challenge really is collecting the data. Actually sometimes is easy, just stick out sensors, understanding what it means, and then, you know, translating that. Sometimes a little bit needs a bit of, like, you know, an analytical magic, which is useful to have.
So I suppose in the new job or in the new world, right, and we look at skills for the jobs, I think you can't run away from data science. You must know how to interpret data, right? It's like coding. My time when technology just started, you don't have to be a coder, right? You can just be a person in the periphery of technology. But I think today you need to really understand a little bit about that if you want to get into a space like technology, but you don't have to be an expert in it. I suppose that's the point. Okay, I think this is a good time for us to run the second poll. We have a second poll coming up. So Suchan, could we just start the second poll? All right, audience, you have about a minute to run the second poll. Okay. So, Suchan, are we good to reveal the poll?
Yes.
Okay.
With Jiaying. Okay, great.
Okay, so first question in the poll is, what are your biggest concerns in taking up a green job? We have 63% saying do not have the relevant experience or background. So always back to the concern, right? I think this is in fact, if you look at all the comments in the chat that people post, it's always about, I'm not having enough experience or background in that space. And of course, competition came in pretty high as well in score. And the next one being 45% said they are either somewhat confident, right? But if you look at it, there seems to be a general confidence in in landing a green jobs. So I would like to just bring our panelists to comment. Do you see, does anything here surprise you? Does it, is there any advice you want to give to the audience, hearing what they have said, and also looking at some of the comments in the chat?
Maybe I'll take on the first two biggest concerns. Lack of relevant background education and competition from other applicants. Strangely, I think this is true on an individual level, but is irrelevant on a big picture, right? Because very few people have the relevant background education, and we need people. So sure, you may not have the relevant background, but very few people have, and we need more people. So just throw your hat in the ring. And then competition from other applicants. Yeah, I think there's the demand is still growing. I don't think we've anywhere hit the peak yet, but this is the right sector to join because we're still kind of like rounding the knee of the curve, right? Especially if you look at areas. I mean, solar is pretty well established, but I mean, of course, there's still a lot of opportunities. But across the board, nature-based solutions. A lot of MNCs will need help with their transition. I think many big companies will suffer, some will disappear, but a lot will survive, and they will all need help transitioning, right? And most of them, especially the large corporates, it's really hard to shift the mindset of workers. But in order to survive, they will have to, and all these will require a lot of transformation jobs. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
Can I add? Because I feel like I'm coming from a place where I might be perceived as someone who has the right background. I did botany, not just undergrad. I did a PhD in it, for crying out loud. All this does not actually give me all that much more compatibility, in terms of the actual work in the jobs that I've taken. A little bit, yes, here and there, especially in the botanic gardens. But overall, no. I was ill-equipped for my first job, which was a park manager, so I think the being able to, okay, so, and also coming from a place where we hire people as well, right? The actual, what you studied is much less important than the experiences that you have done to get to the interest you are showing in the job, the spark. And if you have a generalist job, I think someone talked about, generalists are losing out or whatever. Actually, that's really important as well for so much stuff, because so much of the stuff in the environmental sustainability sector, things like communications, interpretation, networking, a whole, trying to create connections with pulling in different things together. So I don't know, some of these, the generalists are super important and we need them as well. And a lot of it comes down to how you articulate the value that you bring. So people actually are out there ready to hire. I think it's, we need to show why.
Super. Ilan and Xiaohun, any thoughts?
I think relating to what Jeremy was saying, there is opportunities. Like what I've earlier mentioned. So if you think that you don't have the relevant background, so many people think they don't have the relevant background, right? So that's 63%. Then how do you then co-create or create or evolved and give yourself that relevant experience? And that relevant experience can really just be volunteering, right? We talk about this a whole lot, right? And sometimes you may think that, oh, I studied the wrong degree. It doesn't matter, because there's so many other so-called courses and program out there that, as you continue to enhance and evolve yourself, you will come out and be very focused, right? Be very focused. This is the space that I want to be. Then what can I do to bring myself one notch nearer to it, one more step more relevant to it? And I would say that, that's the only way to help yourself.
Xiaohun? You're muted. I think she's adjusting her camera. Okay, no problem. I
also just want to add that the youth have plenty of opportunities. So you should not tell yourself you have limited, because you have, well, bluntly, you have a longer lifespan. So you've got plenty of opportunity. By sheer fact that you have time to learn, to explore.
Okay,
Excellent.
sorry, I was muted just now. I just want to add that the concerns about not having the relevant background and education, I think this is something, that there's always opportunities, be it through what we had shared earlier on volunteering. And I think very important is to seize the opportunity that is given to you. Like, for example, in MParks, we do hire people to train them, basically, to give them the opportunities. And with years of experience, for example, there's always what we call professional certification program, like our horticulturists and arborists. They actually go through international certification that is accredited. So these are what we call training and learning, throughout the entire career. So it's not just limited by the first degree or diploma that you have, that we consider as relevant. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I just want to call out Therese's example, right? You hired someone who was a dessert chef for a job as a orchid growing and propagation specialist. So that's an example right there for our audience. Okay, I see Joe. Joe's hand is raised. So Joe, you want to unmute and show your face and ask your questions?
Hi, Aslam. Thank you. Can I ask the panelists rather
Sure.
the depressing question that's been bothering me for some time?
Okay, go ahead.
Have we gone past the point of no return when it comes to climate change? And if so, what other more drastic moonshot ideas and measures must we take? Because clearly giving up is not an option. Thanks.
Okay, who wants to go for that? It's a good question. Jeremy, looks like you're about to say something.
Have we got? I think we've gone past the exit, but we can always turn the car around, and go back to that exit. Yeah. But yeah, it's really getting really, really, really late.
I think it depends on how you define what is the point of no return. Are we going to be able to stop, the sea level rise that's going to happen because of probably not, because these things have chains of reactions and it take a long time. But I also don't discount human ingenuity. And the fact that, as Jeremy says, when the fact that we're in a position now where we're actually seeing the impact across all countries, not just the third world, not just the really certain impoverished areas only, which are going to be hit the worst. You're getting people who are seeing the problems and now putting their minds to it. And I'm pretty sure human ingenuity is pretty good in terms of thinking about how to solve some of these problems. Like there's all kinds of work now about trying to suck out the carbon dioxide in the air and put it back in the ground, which is where it came from fossil fuels and all that, which is not those kinds of things. Important problems that we're trying to solve now. Are we going to stop the impacts of, are we going to stop the changes, or no? I don't think so. It will take a long time, and things are a bit confusing as well in terms of knockdown effects and cyclical things and all that. So
can I mildly disagree with the Honorable Dr. Therese?
You can disagree.
I think we could actually reverse it. So I was actually on the second VPL flight back from Germany. I was visiting some family members. The ruling party lost an election because of climate change. And I think the one thing that has been missing in all this discussion for the last decades is political will. But right now, people are understanding you can get voted out of office if your government doesn't act on climate change. Yeah, because I think the young people feel really strongly about that. And I think that's the strongest incentive that we can have, is if our young people are really passionate and they're prepared to walk the talk, right? And I think that will trigger a lot of change. And the last thing I'll add is there's a saying: an unprecedented crisis triggers an unprecedented investment. So those of you who lived through the global financial crisis in 2008 will understand that, right? Or even COVID. I think climate change is a crisis that's 10 times or more greater, right? So it will trigger an unprecedented investment, and there's going to be a lot of people who don't deserve to get that capital injection getting it, but that's fine. Ultimately, money is just money, right? So we'll throw whatever we have to solve the problem, and I think we'll get somewhere. I don't know if we'll solve it completely, but we'll get somewhere. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I'm very conscious of time here because we are 2 minutes before we end. So if I could just ask our panel to just stay on a little bit, maybe some concluding remarks for our audience. I thought I would start with Ilan. Perhaps we can start with you and then maybe end with Jeremy. Ilan, concluding remarks.
I think I saw I wasn't catching up with all the chat, but I saw someone mentioning that, you know, it's already not good enough, and how much longer to how much more to do, something like that, right? Not in the exact words, but I feel like, you know, every single step and every little effort will have an impact. If we don't do anything about it, whether it's climate change, and the world is not going to get better, it's going to get worse. But that consolidated even awareness, that consolidated effort is that little that we can do, and on an accumulated basis, there will be a positive impact.
Wonderful. Xiao Hun?
I totally agree. Every little effort is better to start now than not to do anything at all, seriously. And I think there's lots of growth in this greenery and sustainability sector. And I want to encourage the young ones, you know, to step in, give it a try, because we need succession planning and continuity to continue our efforts. You know, it's going to be a very long drawn battle. So we just cannot just give up at this point. Yeah.
Nice. Therese?
I feel like I may have painted myself in a corner as if I'm the naysayer, but actually, no, I agree with everybody else as well, that everything we do is worth doing. Whether or not it's from the giant perspective of being able to stop something which, you know, a freight train, or more from the human experience that's what our life is anyway. What we are experiencing is our own lifetime, and what we can do and how we can improve it. And I just wanted to, I'm going to end off again in that to me, sustainability and the way of thinking about sustainability is not something you should choose to go into or not. It actually is our collective responsibility. So regardless of whatever job you're in, and if you want to particularly go into green jobs, that's great. Even if you have a less traditional green job, there's so much we can do to also make that the work that we do and the way we approach life more sustainable. And it shouldn't be a thing to choose. We really should be doing it from our collective responsibility as the human race anyway. So yeah, that's it.
Wonderful. Jeremy?
Yeah, so I moved back to Singapore in 2017. I've been away for more than 10 years. And when I moved back, I met this friend who was moving out, and we had this discussion because he was the one friend I knew who was concerned about climate change, and he's moving out of Singapore because of climate change, right? He thinks we're going to get flooded. It's going to be the apocalypse. We don't have anything, so he's packing up and go. And he asked me, like, why are you coming back? And I said, it's exactly because I think climate change is going to be the biggest challenge of our time. And Singapore being the capital of the world's largest archipelago, this is where the action is. So for better or for worse, this is where we need to be, right? And I think we will face with this challenge. And in facing this challenge, it will make us a greater people and a greater nation than we have ever been.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to all our panelists. Thank you to all our audience for staying with us throughout. So this is the second of 2 webinars we held on green jobs, one that looked specifically on PMATs, and today the focus was a little bit more on the younger generation. So for me, you know, I'm not that young. I've been through the Asian financial crisis and the global financial crisis. So you can roughly tell that, you know, I've seen some action up and down. But I wanted to talk about just 2 things. In the lifetime of my career, I have transitioned significantly in many different jobs. I've been in supply chain, I've been in I've been in technology. I've actually done a startup back when Yahoo, was the #1 search engine, right, in the 90s. So the one thing I always believe in is human ingenuity and human creativity. And I know that we can solve any problem we want if we all come together. And there is one takeaway that always reminds me that if we can tackle the climate problem. Back in the 90s and into the early 2000s, remember we had this ozone problem. There was an ozone depletion and people were getting skin cancer. So what did the world do? They basically stopped the production of CFC, carbon fluorocarbons, if I'm not wrong. CFC, that's why I remember the acronym. But eventually the climate healed itself. It healed itself, right? But the world came together. Yes, it was just one problem, but it was one problem where we all came together. I think the COVID pandemic is the same thing, right? And I think now with the climate crisis, the urgency that a lot of people are putting on it, yes, it's a far bigger problem, but we will tackle it one at a time and we will get there. And this is probably the most exciting time for the younger generation. 1995, when I was still in university, the internet had 14 million users, 14 million on the internet. Can you believe that? Today, where are we? So the world is your oyster. Go out there. Don't worry about what degree you had. Everything I learned in university, I don't use it today, right? Yes, I've been moving from one job to the next. So give it a shot and try, this industry. It's going to be an exciting journey. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic back to our webinar lead, which is Suchen for this round. Suchen, you want to take it over?
Aslam, thanks for passing it back, and thanks to all the speakers. It was a very insightful webinar, and I learned a lot. I mean, I've already started my first job, but the next one is always in the back of one's mind. And yeah, it was a very positive, the discussion ended on a very positive note, which was very inspiring. So as mentioned, special thanks to our organizing and supporting partners for this webinar. People's Association helped us with a lot of the admin matters, as well as Green at Heart. And then for supporting partners, huge thanks to Sunseap, Audacity, and NParks for supporting us with providing your amazing speakers who shared a lot of great insights today. And apart from the speakers and the people who helped to organize, we also like to thank our team. As mentioned, Green SG Collab is a ground-up initiative. So we made up of people from very diverse backgrounds, and we organize a lot of different events and work on different projects. If you are interested in joining us, you can go to our Facebook and get in touch with us, or you can just drop any of us a message now on the Zoom chat. Yeah, so huge thanks to all the people in the Green SG Collab team who helped with organizing this. And last but not least, please give us your feedback for this webinar. The link is there, as well as a QR code if you rather just scan something with your phone. And please like and follow us to find out more about our upcoming events. We will continue having more webinars going forward, so stay tuned for those, as well as other projects that we have. And with that, I'd like to end off the webinar. Thanks everyone for joining and staying to the end. It was a huge pleasure having all of you here today. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.